Paul Constant, self-hating writer. So, all writers? Click the links for Odysee, chute, support me on Coffee, join the channel, win a book or graphic novel that I don't want anymore. First of all, this is the cover. It's oh so wacky. I'm not going to make fun of this guy's looks because it's not his looks that is the issue. It's the way he carries himself. He's got a bunch of videos on YouTube doing interviews and talks and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean when you watch him. And honestly, this could be a 2-hour video going through his comics, his newsletters, Twitter and interviews. But you would weave dental floss into a noose and delete yourself in your Epstein didn't kill himself closet. The guy's really, really hard to take. Smarmy and whiny and passive-aggressive, all rolled up in one package. It is really hard to look at. He's left of center, and he mentions white males and his hatred for them as often as he can. So this is, I guess, a lot of self-hatred and projection. I'm listening to an interview as I write this, and he literally just mentioned that phrase, white men, came up again in his interview. It was with the comics Multiverse. It's an interview that has 7 views and 0 likes, dislikes, or comments. To be blunt, it's 2 soy boys blowing smoke up each other's butts. The interview is about his latest comic. It's called Snelson, about a canceled comic. And here Paul Constant starts to laugh at the canceled stand-up comics who are telling, or the kind of the death of comics and stand-up, who are telling him that political correctness is killing comedy, which it is. I've made videos about this a long time ago. It absolutely is killing comedy. But Paul doesn't address that point in the interview. He just laughs at them and moves on, which is weird because his comic is about like a 40 to 50-year-old-ish comic who's not happy at the death of comedy. But here's the thing. Paul is glad comedy is dying because something, diversity, marginalized, oppression, whatever, comedy is a pretty deep part of the human experience, and globalist vermin like these guys are legitimately happy that comedy is dying. They want every topic haram, and it's also an issue of who controls the narrative, controls the media, that kind of thing, where the court gesture was an opportunity to speak truth to power. And if they know, the left knows that they control the narrative right now, so they don't want comedians being the voice of populism. Now, comedians have been far left for a long, long time, but they're not far left enough. And it's not 100% far left comedians. There are some comedians who are on the right, or at least more libertarian comedians who will poke fun at both sides, and the left can't have that at all. Oh, there's a scene where they do this overwritten comedy bit. The thing is, the guy's not funny. So you're doing a scene where you're trying to write comedy. It's like, have someone else write it for you, or just make it a very, very brief scene. But it goes on through several pages of trying to write comedy. It's like, none of it is landing. None of it makes sense. Like, are you trying to... the guy's motivation for the story is all over the map. Oh, and to keep it 100 with you, Paul says he has comedian friends in the interview. No, he doesn't have friends. Because he's the kind of guy that if you disagree with him on one detail, then he'll keep arguing it until he works himself up into a frizzy... Is that a word? I don't think that's what I was looking for. And disowns you. He is a deeply weird, fish-lipped little guy. And there's something unsettling about him. Like, if you find out that he ran a human meat barbecue, everyone who knew him would, like, yeah, I could kind of understand that about that guy. Now, I'm not crazy. I read his comics. I actually spent a couple hours doing this last night. His blog and his Twitter. He even gave a talk on the Seattle publishing scene and the Borders Amazon issue where they were doing publishing with Amazon. He mentions white males like every chance he gets. Like, Paul, have you looked in a mirror, friend? The thing with axe grinders is that when there's a body of work online, and everyone has a body of work online now, and you mention your hate for these people, or you make the evil blonde man the antagonist in every story you write, it's literally blonde hair, blue-eyed man bad in his comics. It's a bit obvious. The thing is, very few people are going to put this stuff together because his comics are horrible. I'm getting the feeling he's got money coming in from something else. I don't know if he's a trust fund kid or what, but it's like some of these people are writing comics and you look at them and you're like, this doesn't make sense. You're not making a living selling 1,000 comics every 2 years. His interviews are openly hate-filled, so he just kind of bounces from one project to another, and he doesn't ever notice how obvious his hatred is, and if you pointed it out, he probably wouldn't understand why you don't also share his hate. People have said that I have a weird voice or am unsettling, but that is just a voice and the delivery. I want you to have more free speech and liberty. I want you to have a 9mm on your hip at all times, an M4 at home with a 12 gauge, a 30-06, plus a battle axe and a spear, if that is your pleasure. And grow weed in your backyard. Do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. I believe in the open marketplace of ideas. If you can make an argument that national or international socialism is the best path forward, then let's discuss it. I want an open platform for all voices to be argued and rebutted. Present evidence and cross-examination. I want more liberty. This guy wants to shut down anything that offends him, which is anything that is pro-nation, or Christian or male. It's an ever-increasing list of things, like in that Terry Pratchett book, Monstrous Regiment, where everything goes on the list of more and more things are becoming haram. His comic is about someone like Jerry Seinfeld from the 90s, in case I can't believe someone wouldn't possibly know who Jerry Seinfeld is, who dated a young woman in the 90s, and he's still doing the stand-up circuit, but he was canceled in this story for being 25 and dated a 17-year-old in the 90s, which doesn't make sense because that wouldn't have been a big deal. Seinfeld didn't get canceled at all. He was 38 and dated a 17-year-old, Shoshana, I don't know, Lichtenstein or something. So this guy's story universe is already in trouble. The story, and I don't even know nowadays a 38-year-old comedian dating a 17. I don't know how that would play nowadays. Probably not very well. So the story is about this Seinfeld character doing a comedy tour with a bunch of left-wing purse puppies. And Seinfeld is upset that people are getting canceled and comedy is dying because of cultural Marxism, which is absolutely what is going on. You can't have free speech and socialism. It doesn't work because people quickly point out that all your projections are all wrong. And then after the projection, the reality comes crashing down, it's like you went back and changed the history of those projections to say like, oh yeah, we're over our projections. Like, that's just Russia for the past 50 years. But Paul writes it as if this idea is ridiculous. Well, either people are getting canceled or they're not. The story says the Seinfeld character was kicked out of Hollywood for being 25, dating a 17-year-old. The real Seinfeld was 38 when he was bending over a 17-year-old. And he wasn't kicked out of Hollywood. That story doesn't make any sense. He got a little pushback for it at the time, but it's not that, like around the world, it's just not that much of an issue. So the writer has them tour the South, and there are people in overalls in the audience. This isn't the 1950s. The South is majority black and Mexican now. Minority, it is a minority European. As America, it will be a minority European in about 15 years. But the writer grew up in Massachusetts and moved to Seattle or something. So he's one of those coastal elites. He's got no idea about flyover country. He has no idea what he's talking about. He's thinking the Deep South is, his perspective of it is from, Hollywood. It's like there's so many people who, they know what they know from Hollywood. And then you look and you're like, you can't possibly be this naive to not know what's going on. So they work in several jokes at the South's expense, which... Why would you insult your audience? Like really insult your audience, like these stand-up people are doing. But they never set up why they hate an entire geographic region or why it's acceptable for you to be racist to a huge group of people in the South. because this guy's a really bad writer with a chip on his shoulder about the people of the light, but he never explains his hatred. He implies that his crew has a big black guy, a Jew, a trans, and maybe some other BLTs. You get the shaved side of the head. I assume that's kind of a visual giveaway. And that trope has been done to death. He implies that they're in danger in the South from the blonde-haired folks. Dear Paul Constant, have you seen the FBI crime stats? Statistically, if you suffer harm in the South or anywhere in America, it won't be from the blondes. The opposite is true. You are safest around them. Hollywood is controlled by globalists who hate Europeans. When they set stories in the South, they portray European Americans as committing all the bad acts that other non-European groups actually do commit. But for some reason in Hollywood, they're just completely invisible. Go to YouTube, sub to the ABC, CBS, NBC affiliates in cities in the South or anywhere you want. Go have yourself a nice time binge watching what you see in 90% of these Malum in Say acts. Skip the next part. Hollywood Lives. Go make a list of a few hundred movies set in the South in the past 60 years. You will see the opposite of what the news and FBI report. Even the news is far left, right? Far left news. They're far left interpretation, who they show and who they won't show. Even the news, it takes an obvious dig at Christianity. Even the news has to show what's going on. It's overwhelming. And anyway, so Hollywood has been pushing this anti-white hate for as long as they could. Go back, and when you think of movies that you've watched, I remember watching movies set in the South showing white people as basically the devil incarnate, committing just deletions every day. And then you actually look at the crime stats, and none of it is true. It's just absolute. No wonder the people in the South hate you so much. The internet is making it possible to tear the mask off these anti-white people and expose them to the burning, incandescent light of truth. Anyway, so Seinfeld and the Purse Puppy crew go to their comedy tour as if a black comedian is a rarity. Some of the best comedians in the world are black American comedians. Who's that guy? Eddie Murphy was probably one of the best comedians in America. Eddie Murphy. Who actually I think got involved with trans people, which is fine. No judgments from me. But it's like, there's a bunch like Kevin Hart and who's the guy who was in those Kevin Smith movies. There's a ton of black comedians. They're like literally some of the best comedians in the world. It's like Paul Constant lives in a world of imaginary oppression. There are a ton of black comedians working comedy clubs in the South. They have no fear of blonde people because they know who isn't going to rob and hurt them. The other comedians are a trans something who Seinfeld refers to as a trans woman. That's not how people refer to trans people who are their friends. That's not how a comedian would refer to them. And, I can't even say how you refer to these people. You refer to people using the most offensive nicknames you could because you're comedians and you're looking for new ways of thought, not to obey the narrative, but to go against the narrative, even if it's just offensive, just to be offensive, because you're trying to break out of this mold and think along new pathways, not along the pathways of cultural Marxism. You want to do what isn't acceptable. So no, you're not going to call them a trans woman. You know what you call them. This isn't correct me if I'm wrong, but are there any funny trans comedians out there? Are BLT comedians in general funny? And if you got some, name them, put them in the comments. I'll do an investigation. It's like that guy waiting for women to be funny. It's like a 24-hour video before he passes out. He never laughs. And there's a deal with the Jew comedian who's on the comedy tour as if that's oh god, man, Mike Pence jokes. That's how fresh are Mike Pence jokes. It turns out Mike Pence was right about never being alone in a room with a woman without a chaperone, because unfortunately people lie for all kinds of reasons. So Sarah Silverman, Chelsea Handler, Amy Schumer, Jew female comedians are probably the majority of comedians. And I don't know if you find the Silverman, Handler, Schumer funny, but they've all been funny in the past. And Chelsea Handler is probably the star of that group because she, before Trump derangement syndrome, she had probably less of an axe to grind, where Silverman is like actively anti-white. She says stuff that really, like, you go back and you watch her comedy specials and you look at it and you're like, you got issues. I actually read her book and I read all the Chelsea Handler's books. She wrote about 5. Both Silverman has got some really weird childhood stuff going on. So I kind of have a little empathy for her, but even reading her book, she's talking about growing up and like having a sleepover with a bunch of white people, and it's like you could hear the hatred. It was creepy. It was really creepy the way she sees herself. Chelsea Handler actually is legitimately funny. So there's a ton of Jewish female comedians, but the stuff Paul writes, none of it makes any sense. Everything is a straw man because he really, really hates the beautiful blonde people of the light of Uggs and Starbucks and Volvos. In his interview, he is glad that censorship... Oh, is this where she says it? Yeah, why would a trans person on stage somewhere in the South saying that to the Southern audience? And in the background video, background images, they're all fair-skinned people in the South. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's like this guy's never been to the South. He's never left the coastal regions. It's like the South again. It's a European minority. It's really hard to get through. Oh, and then he says he's in his interviews he's going like he's glad that comedy is comic books are changing because the comic books of the 80s haven't aged well. It's like, have you ever read comic books of the 80s? They age like fine wine. They're way better than anything nowadays. This is why. Like how many this is going to sell like 900 issues. He did another comic which I'm actually going to review of a 5-part series, which is as cringy as this. I'll wait a month before I come back to this guy. He's got serious issues where I'm kind of thinking he's got money coming in from, he's a trust fund kid or something. He's got money coming in where it's just not it's like he's just not worried about putting out like a 900 or 1,000 issue selling comic that's just dog food. This is just all axe grinding propaganda. Comedy is dying. Like stand-up, even before the gift from China, I don't see how it would have continued post the Trump derangement syndrome. And I don't know what the future's going to hold, but it's not going to be well. Anyway, so like all he does is straw man and steel man. It's just, it's hard to take. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, guys. I will see you all next episode.